The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Elena Martinez adjusted her crisp white apron for the 100th time that morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the white roses in the grand ballroom of the Hampton estate, each petal a painful reminder of her own wedding day 5 years ago. The same flowers, the same overwhelming scent of wealth and privilege that once surrounded her when she was Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, wife to tech billionaire Marcus Blackwood. But that woman was supposed to be dead. Elena caught her reflection in the polished silver serving tray and barely recognized herself. Gone were the designer gowns and perfectly styled hair. Her once pampered hands now bore the calluses of honest work, her face leaner from years of struggle. She'd traded her penthouse view for a cramped studio apartment, her luxury car for bus rides, her identity for survival. Today, she was simply Elena the maid, invisible to the wealthy guests preparing to celebrate Marcus's second wedding to Victoria Sterling, a socialite half his age. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was preparing the wedding that would officially erase her from Marcus's life forever. The morning chaos intensified as wedding coordinators barked orders and florists made final adjustments. Elena kept her head down, focusing on polishing champagne glasses when she heard that familiar deep voice that once whispered sweet promises in her ear. Make sure the champagne is properly chilled. Victoria is particular about temperature. Marcus stood just 10 feet away, adjusting his platinum cufflinks with the same nervous habit she remembered from their own wedding day. At 42, he looked distinguished in his tailored tuxedo, though she noticed new lines around his eyes and threads of silver in his dark hair. Success had been kind to him, but something seemed hollow in his esprit.
Sion. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she continued her work, praying he wouldn't notice her. She'd changed her appearance dramatically after the accident. Darker hair, different style, even coloured contact lenses to hide her distinctive green eyes. The plastic surgery to repair the damage from the car crash had altered her features just enough to make her unrecognizable. "Excuse me, miss." His voice was closer now, and Elena's blood turned to ice. "Could you ensure the bride's suite has fresh flowers?" Victoria specifically requested white orchids. Elena kept her eyes downcast, nodding quickly. "Of course, sir," she replied in a carefully practiced accent, praying her voice wouldn't betray her. But as she turned to leave, she stumbled slightly, catching herself on a nearby table. The movement was instinctive, familiar, the same way she used to catch herself when wearing heels too high for comfort. Marcus's eyes sharpened, studying her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Have we met before?" he asked slowly, his businessman's instinct for details kicking in.
Elena's mouth went dry. "No, sir, I'm new here. Just started with the catering company last week." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. He stared at her for another long moment before Victoria's shrill voice echoed from the bridal suite upstairs. "Marcus, I need you up here now." "Coming, darling," he called back, but his eyes lingered on Elena's face for several more seconds before he finally walked away. Elena released the breath she'd been holding, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. She'd spent 3 years planning for this moment, preparing for the possibility that she might see him again. But nothing could have prepared her for the rush of emotions, love, anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sadness for everything they'd lost. She touched the thin scar along her jawline, hidden beneath carefully applied makeup. The accident that was supposed to kill her had instead given her a second chance at life, a chance to discover who Marcus really was when he thought she was gone forever. Throughout the morning, Eleanor found herself assigned to serve the bridal party, a cruel twist of fate that forced her to watch Victoria prepare for the life that had once been hers. The young bride was everything Elena had once been, beautiful, privileged, and blissfully unaware of the man she was marrying. This dress cost more than most people make in a year, Victoria bragged to her bridesmaids while Elena silently refilled their mimosas. Marcus spares no expense when it comes to me. Unlike his first wife, who was so boring and ordinary, thank goodness she's out of the picture. Elena's hand tightened on the champagne bottle, but she maintained her composure. She'd learned that Marcus had told everyone she'd been driving recklessly the night of the accident, that her death was essentially her own fault. The truth was far different. She'd discovered his affair with Aurea, and confronted him that evening. In her emotional state, she'd driven away in tears and hit black ice on the mountain road. Marcus had visited her in the hospital exactly once. She'd been unconscious, her face bandaged, when she heard him talking to the doctor outside her room. If she survives, she'll need extensive plastic surgery. The rehabilitation could take years, and there's no guarantee she'll be the same person. I can't handle this right now, not with the merger falling through. If anyone asks, tell them she didn't make it. She'd awakened to find herself alone, officially dead according to all records, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a new identity forged by a sympathetic nurse who understood domestic situations gone wrong. "Elena, could you help me with my veil?" Victoria asked, interrupting her dark memories. Elena's hands shook as she adjusted the delicate lace. This veil had been her grandmother's, passed down through 3 generations of women in her family. Marcus had insisted Victoria wear it, claiming it was a family heirloom he'd purchased. Even in death, he was stealing pieces of her. "You know," Victoria continued, admiring herself in the mirror, "Marcus told me his first wife was just a gold digger, married him for his money and tried to take half his fortune when things went south. Good thing she died in that crash before she could ruin him financially." Elena's reflection stared back at her in the mirror, and for a moment she saw not the maid, but the woman she used to be. The woman who had loved Marcus completely, who had worked alongside him to build his empire, who had sacrificed her own career ambitions to support his dreams. "Ma'am," Elena said carefully, "what if she wasn't a gold digger? What if she truly loved him?" Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Please, women like that always have an angle. Marcus is too smart to fall for that twice. He learned his lesson." As the ceremony approached, Eleanor found herself in the impossible position of watching the man she'd loved marry another woman while she served them champagne. The guests cooed over what a perfect couple they made, how Marcus deserved happiness after the tragedy of losing his first wife. During the reception, Eleanor overheard Marcus talking business with his associates, the same cold calculation in his voice that she remembered from their final months together. He spoke about Victoria the way he once spoke about quarterly earnings, as an asset to be managed. "She's young enough to give me the heir I need," he told his business partner, "and her father's connections will help with the European expansion. It's a win-win situation." Elena's heart broke all over again, not for herself, but for the naive young woman who had no idea she was simply another business transaction. She'd been there once, believing in Marcus's love while he calculated her worth to his empire. But as she watched Marcus throughout the evening, she noticed something else. Despite his confident exterior, he seemed distracted, almost haunted. Several times she caught him staring into the distance with an expression she recognized, the same look he'd worn during their happiest moments together, as if he was remembering something precious he'd lost. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Part of him still loved her, even now, but his pride and greed had become more important than love, and he'd chosen to let her die rather than fight for their marriage. Near midnight, as the reception wound down, Eleanor found herself alone in Marcus's study while collecting empty glasses. The room was exactly as she remembered: his grandfather's desk, the first edition books she'd helped him collect, their wedding photo conspicuously absent from its former place on the mantel. "I knew it was you." Elena spun around to find Marcus standing in the doorway, his bow tie undone and his jacket discarded. His eyes held a mixture of shock, anger, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "You're supposed to be dead," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly for the first time in 3 years. "Maybe I am. Maybe the woman you married died in that crash and this is someone else entirely." He stepped closer, studying her face with desperate intensity. "Why didn't you come back? Why let me think you were gone?" "Because you wanted me gone," she replied, her voice steady, despite the chaos in her heart. "You made that choice when you walked away from my hospital bed. You made that choice when you married her wearing my grandmother's veil." Marcus's face crumpled as the truth of her words hit him. "Eleanor, I was scared. The doctors said you might never be the same, and I couldn't handle losing you slowly. It was easier to grieve and move on than to watch you struggle." "So you chose the easy path," Eleanor said, tears finally spilling over. "You chose your comfort over my life, over our love." "I made a mistake," he whispered, reaching for her hands. "The biggest mistake of my life. Every day without you has been hell. Victoria isn't you. No one could ever be you." Elena pulled her hands free, stepping back. "But you married her anyway. You built a life without me anyway. You let everyone believe I was a gold digger who deserved to die." The weight of 3 years of grief, anger, and survival settled between them. Eleanor realized this moment wasn't about revenge or reclaiming her old life. It was about choosing who she wanted to be moving forward. "I forgive you," she said finally, surprised by the truth in her words. "Not for you, but for me. I forgive you because holding on to this anger has been killing me slowly, and I refuse to let you have that power over me anymore." Marcus looked shattered. "What happens now?" Elena straightened, feeling stronger than she had in years. "Now you go back to your wife and try to be a better husband to her than you were to me. And I go back to my new life, the one I built from nothing after you left me with nothing." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Goodbye, Marcus, for real this time." 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the doorway of her own small bakery, watching the morning sun stream through windows she'd cleaned herself. The settlement money from Marcus, his guilty conscience finally catching up with him, had allowed her to start over properly. But she'd built this new life with her own hands and heart. The bell above the door chimed as her first customer of the day entered. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who'd become like a grandmother to her, smiled warmly while ordering her usual blueberry muffin and coffee. "You look happy today, dear," Mrs. Patterson observed. Eleanor smiled, wiping flour from her hands. "I feel happy. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again." Through the window, she could see the small apartment above the bakery where she'd created a home filled with laughter instead of marble silence. She'd learned that love wasn't about crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. It was about choosing someone every day, supporting their dreams while pursuing your own, and building something beautiful together. Her phone buzzed with a message from David, the kind veterinarian she'd been dating for 2 months. "Can't wait to try those cookies you promised. Pick you up at 7?" Elena typed back quickly, her heart light with possibility. This time, she was writing her own love story, and she was both the author and the heroine of her own tale.